Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. I'm your host, Art Robbins, and it's great to have you join us. The Leadership Art Podcast features insightful conversations with industry leaders who lead with purpose. Here you will discover practical insights, powerful lessons, and everyday inspiration to elevate your own impact, whether you are leading now or preparing to step up. We want to inspire you to be the best leader you can be. And today, my guest is Ken Schmitt. Ken is a talent management specialist with over 3 decades of experience in executive recruiting and human capital management. His journey has taken him from firms like Heidrick Struggles to launching his own successful executive search firms, TurningPoint Executive Search, and now Ascentria Search Partners. He is also a well-published industry thought leader and a community advocate supporting local businesses and nonprofits in the Southern California area. And Ken, it's great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Artie. I appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I am too. And I'm particularly excited to have you as a guest because talent management is such a critical topic. And it's also such a key skill that successful leaders must master. And it seems today that leaders are facing an unprecedented number of trends and developments that have dramatically changed the talent management landscape. I mean, whether it's AI or DEI or work from home or return to work, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's so many things going on. And I'd love to get your insights on some of these trends and particularly how leaders can understand and approach them to be more effective leaders. But maybe first, just to set a context, I wonder if you could share with us, what was it about talent management that attracted you to it in the first place? And more important, to make a career of it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we always joke in this industry that nobody goes to college to become a recruiter, right? You typically do something else first, and then either someone says, "Oh, you'd be great in the HR world," or "Have you thought about recruiting?" Or you go to a recruiting company to be recruited to one of their clients, and that recruiter says, "Hey, you should join us instead." So for me, actually, I've been working since age 14. My dad was a Jack in the Box franchisee, and my mom was in real estate. So I started working at a very early age, grew up in a self-employed, very entrepreneurial household. Always knew that at some point I wanted to have my own business, but obviously didn't know what that was going to be in my mid and early teens. Started working and got involved with shift leader management and management training and working with the public for 5 years plus on my dad's Jack in the Box. I'm working with a very diverse group of people, which I loved, folks coming in and working with customers on a daily basis. So I knew that my career was going to be something around a people-facing type of a function, if you will, versus a desk job, which just wasn't me. And I actually worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for about 5.5 years, coming out of college in 92 to late 97. And then, believe it or not, I answered an ad in the paper back when there were actually job ads in actual papers back in the late 90s, not quite the same these days. I answered a job for a recruiter and did some interviewing. I thought, this is really cool. And I liked what I kind of termed putting a puzzle together, where you had people, job descriptions, companies, and compensation structures, all those things, and trying to find that ideal fit. And I really enjoyed that. So I got into it and fell in love, and it ended up suiting me very well. And here we are now, 30 years later, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still loving it.
Well, that's fantastic. And you can't have a successful business without great people.
And it literally does. It's one of the few things that truly transcends every business, whether you're a one-person shop, whether you're 50,000 people, no matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what sector you're in or what part of the world you're in. You've got to have the right people. And I think even beyond that, probably more important, is you have to understand who are the right kinds of people for your organization. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall down. We have this term called your employment brand. Every company has a brand in terms of what they do, what service they offer, what product they manufacture. That's the brand awareness that the customers have. But there's also a brand awareness around you as an employer. And everybody's different. There's not a right or a wrong. It's just, who are you? What do you stand for? How do you operate? Great example right now is return to office, right? Working from home or working in the office. Neither one is right or wrong or better or worse. It's just different. But you've got to make sure that you understand, that you acknowledge, and that you own that brand. Otherwise, the kind of people that you try to hire potentially could be misaligned with the kind of brand that you're building as an employer.
I like that term, a employment brand rather. And I think that's something leaders really need to pay attention to not just the business strategy, but when you think about the prongs of the business strategy, that's a key enabler to it. So if I'm a leader, how would you advise approaching this employment brand challenge? How to think about it, how to define it, how to articulate it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been married to a marriage and family therapist for 33 years. So communication is really important to me, both in my personal life, but also professionally. And I think it really comes down to communicating clearly and effectively with your current team members. Doing a quick poll, a survey, asking people what are the top three things that come to mind that are unique about our brand and our culture. And people say, well, what does culture mean? And it means different things to different people. But for the most part, the definition of culture is how do things get done in our organization? Is it in person? Is it virtual? Is it through seminars and webinars, or is it just walk down the hall? It's more of an ad hoc. All those things really feed into that brand, how you operate, and effectively your culture. So the best place to start is by asking the people that are already immersed in your culture, and those are your current employees, and then asking what things can we maybe change, right? I think a lot of employers avoid that because they're a little bit afraid of what they might hear. Well, if you're afraid of what your employees might tell you about your company, that's probably step number one is fix that problem. That shouldn't be something to hide from or to shy away from, right? And also figuring out, the people that do work out, the folks that are longer tenured, are there any common threads? Are they coming from a particular background, certain education, or maybe there's more people that are non-degreed than there are with college degrees? Maybe that's part of your brand, right? Maybe it's people that came from a different industry that wanted to learn your industry because they had a real kind of affinity for what it is that you do. And those folks have done really well. And then compare those to the folks that maybe haven't done so well. And all those little data points along the way help you start to kind of paint a picture of what your culture truly is. And again, that will then get you to a better, more effective way of hiring and retaining your good people as well.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and you made me think about a theme that was raised in the prior podcast episodes we did, that a good leader has to embrace vulnerability.
Mhm.
They have to be willing to hear things that they don't want to hear or they may be uncomfortable hearing and face that directly. That's really is key to being effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the days in the 80s where you had all the vulture capitalists and all the people that we all remember from Wall Street, right? The movie Wall Street. But even the Jack Welches back then, it was all command and control. It was my way or the highway. He forced all of his employees, all of his leaders to rank ABC, all the employees, and the B's had to be on the track to become A's, and the C's were forced to be let go, right? You had to constantly cut, I think it was 5 to 10% of your staff every
I
year. And
remember
that was,
that. The Big
yeah.
Four did that too. I
Yeah,
was
right, exactly, right. Very much so. That was the way that we all kind of
yeah.
grew up. I mean, and through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we didn't know any better, right? And then you had the advent of servant leadership come in, which really kind of turned things on its ear and make people realize, okay, maybe this isn't the right and the only way to do things, right? Maybe we need to spend more time engaging with our employees and really asking them more of a bottom-up approach versus a top-down. That's really important. These days, the companies that do well have more of a democratized employment approach and style versus that command and control focus they had back in the 80s. I think that's really important. And that communication, that engagement with your employees, not only in terms of retention, but also attracting great people, that's going to come across very quickly. Because these days, whether you're a good employer or a bad employer, news spreads extremely fast. Everything from compensation to how leaders operate. Was it over Zoom and it was very cold and not very empathetic, or did you actually take the time to talk to people individually, right? All those things, they go viral in about 3.5 seconds. And a quote, internal memo is no longer an internal memo. It is going to get out to the public sphere some way or some fashion at some point. And so you've got to be careful about that. And so the companies that own that, and when they're willing to be vulnerable, to your point earlier, that really goes a long way to really support that structure and to also say, you know what, we made a mistake. We didn't handle this the way we should have. We could have done it better. We've learned from it. We won't repeat it. But that's my mea culpa, right? To say, I'm being vulnerable. I made a mistake, as opposed to just doubling down on everything that you decide as though what you're handing down is coming from on high.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to talent acquisition
Mhm.
these days, has culture overtaken the company and the position in terms of what's being evaluated?
I think the best companies blend the two. right? DEI is a great example of that, right? The DEI that was rolled out after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, all the horrible things that happened in 2020, it was a knee-jerk reaction. It was a lot of big public companies getting a lot of public pressure to do something. Maybe this is controversial to say this, but I don't know if most of those companies were really behind that. They were forced to do it, or they felt forced to do it. And because of that, at some point, unfortunately, it's inevitably probably going to fail, because as soon as something goes sideways or they have to cut costs, that's the first place where it happens. So it is unfortunate that we didn't do a better job of using this as a way to really understand what's the value of having a more diverse workforce, right? It's really important. And there's great value, both monetarily and socially. And we didn't do a great job of that. So I think the pendulum swung so far to the other side that unfortunately it became a lightning rod. And now you're seeing the pullback of DEI across the board, which I certainly do not agree with. Look at Target right now, right? They have gone back and forth trying to please everybody, and now they're pleasing nobody. If they had just stuck to their guns in terms of who they are as an employer brand, those core customers that are now leaving in droves, they would have stayed put with them. The better companies, to your questions, find a way to blend the importance of culture fit with the obviously incredible importance of skills fit and understanding what is the job that's being asked to be done, what skills are needed to do that job effectively. You can't have just one or the other. It's got to be a nice blend.
Yeah, but companies and leaders really need to know who they are. And if they could set the right value, if they have their compass in the right direction, then these programs that enable a strategy, it becomes clearer how to operate it. And
Right.
the topic of DEI, and maybe it's impossible not to be controversial when you talk about it. It always amazed me how we got into this polarization. People either talk about DEI or they talk about meritocracies. The two of those are mutually exclusive. There's no overlap. So how do you find that happy medium and degrees of difference in your approach, but it shouldn't be 180 degrees?
Right, exactly. The way that I try to reframe it whenever I have this kind of a conversation is it's less around diversity and more around diversity of thought. You think about every company out there when a new product is being developed, right? A company doesn't rely solely on what the product manager or product development team or engineers are doing. If they relied solely on that one perspective, they would have no idea how marketable this product or service is going to be. So anybody that's developing a new product goes out to other parts of the organization. They talk to sales, marketing, operations, IT, accounting, because you need that diversity of thought. You want different perspectives that will inform whether or not you deploy this new product or service. The same thing applies to diversity of thought across gender and age and educational background, industry experience. All those things come into play. So when you have a more diverse organization across all those things, you're bringing people to the table with different backgrounds, different experiences, right? Sometimes it's more ethnic, sometimes it's more industry related, but you have a more effective decision ultimately because you've got other perspectives in there.
Well, and supporting your point about diversity of thought, you need that diversity of experiences to
Right,
get diversity of thought. And
right.
the way you have a diversity of experiences is bringing in people of different backgrounds. If
Right,
they all have the same background, whether it's a race, religion, gender,
right.
or whatever background,
Exactly,
you're
right.
eliminating diversity of experience and therefore diversity of thought.
Yeah. I always think back also in this. So I got into recruiting in early 1998 and the run up to Y2K and the bubble and everything there. Remember, you and I both remember how anybody who had an MBA and a quote unquote good idea got a company funded, right? And these were a lot of folks that were in their early, mid, maybe late 20s, all very similar from that same cohort, the same age, and they didn't have all that experience that you just talked about. So if you have a company full of only 20 somethings, right? It's just as bad as a company full of only 60 somethings. I mean, you
Right.
need people that are thinking from different perspectives that can bring innovation and true disruption to your organization. You need that diversity of thought. And to your point, that diversity of background and experience. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give a leader on this? I mean, if he recognizes that the needle isn't quite in the right place for his
Yeah.
company, what would you say he could start to do differently? to move in the right direction, to support these principles?
Yeah, it's a great question. God, if I had the answer, I would be, a multi-gazillionaire. I think it again comes back down to communication. I think if he or she is a leader of a department, of a team, of an organization, is going to truly try to make a difference, it's got to start with, okay, what is our starting point? What am I starting with? What does my team think? How can we do things differently? Do we want to bring in people from other backgrounds? The great example is folks that went to Stanford that are brilliant individuals, or UCLA or USC, any of the big schools out there, right? They tend to hire people from those same schools, which is, again, there's no knock against those schools. But again, they're bringing people in that start from the same place. They have that same foundation. They're not coming in as true disruptors from a totally different background. Maybe they didn't go to college at all and they were working like me since age 14, and they just went through life and then finished high school. They got a great offer to work at Xerox or IBM or one of the big 8 firms back then, or big 4 firms now. And they just didn't need that degree for whatever reason, and they got a job. Well, is that a knock on them because they don't have a 4-year degree piece of paper? Not really. If they bring that innovation and that disruption to the table, that's okay. So leaders need to talk to their team and figure out, what do we need more of? What do we need maybe less of? And how can we bridge that gap? It's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take time. So to your question, it's got to start with an assessment of what we have and talking to your current team members.
And I think the leaders also need to have the courage to start to do something. If the company isn't as diverse as it needs to, introduce a
Right.
diversity of thought, start doing something. Because I know, like, from my own experience, I think I was very blessed that I got to travel all around the world
Hmm.
and work with teams from many different countries and many different cultures. And I think that's what really cemented in my mind the value of diversity, is
Right.
actually seeing these people, the talent that's out there, and the contribution and the passion and their needs and their aspirations. And it's because I experienced that firsthand.
Right.
And I think if a leader has the ability to have their entire team start to have those experiences,
Hmm.
then it doesn't become a controversial issue. It becomes just, oh, this is a natural part of doing business. This is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do a lot of work with private equity firms and mainly the middle and lower middle market space. And one of the things that I've really been championing is, these PE firms spending more time looking at the human capital piece of their potential acquisition. Usually, an acquisition, the pre-acquisition due diligence is very focused around IP, compliance, all the financial pieces. Is it going to be accretive on customer base, all that, right? And the people side, it gets very, very little attention, if any, until afterwards. Once you've made the acquisition, now there's a post-acquisition analysis. Okay, let's look at the gaps. What are the people that we have? But I think people need to be part of that equation from the get-go. You got to know what you're starting with, right? Before you decide to actually pull the trigger and make that acquisition. There's also a trend out there that I'm a big believer in is, companies need to do a better job of tracking results, not activity. I think that's one of the big things that people forget about pre-COVID. We're like, oh, everybody was in the office full time. Everything was going great. It was so smooth. They were all engaged. We were more creative. That wasn't the case. We all kind of forget that there were still a lot of disengaged people. I mean, year after year after year, the Gallup poll that comes out about engagement is still around 29 to 34%, which means 2/3 of your workforce, even pre-COVID, maybe they were in the office, but they weren't engaged. It wasn't that great.
This was before they termed the phrase quiet quitting, but people were
Right.
still quiet quitting.
They were. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. So, I mean, companies need to realize that the answer is not just in being in the same physical space as your employees. You've got to focus on the results rather than just the activity. I'm a night person, for example. I have a very small team, but still, I tell them, I don't care if you do it at 4 in the morning or at midnight, as long as the work is getting done. You're not holding up our clients. We're delivering what we commit to our clients. I do a lot of my work at 9, 10 o'clock at night. I don't expect my team to do that because they have different schedules or what have you. But I think we need to focus more so on results and less on just checking boxes with activity, because that's how people get disengaged.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it also opens up a question about the technology and
Hmm.
some of the
Right.
technology trends, because that's really thrown a wrench in the whole way that human capital management is being done. Now, with AI on top of that, You have all these additional fears and anxiety. What is that going to mean for the workforce? Is my job
Sure.
really secure in the future? What should I expect? What's your take on some of those tech trends that are consuming us right now?
Yeah, I mean, AI is happening so fast that people aren't really able to grasp what's going on as quickly as it's happening. And it's just so much uncertainty. We can't say, well, last time this happened, or last time something similar to this happened, we did XYZ. This is truly immensely disruptive. And I think, again, companies just have to own the fact that, yeah, there's going to be jobs lost. The way that, in my experience, technology tends to be very disruptive early on in terms of job loss. Early on, technology comes in, it replaces some people here and there, what have you. But longer term, usually, we'll see what happens with AI, but usually more jobs end up being created than got lost. They're
Yeah.
going to be reworked and retooled. It requires companies to do upskilling and reskilling for sure. And that's the responsibility of the employer to put the effort and time into that to keep their good people, but figure out how to redeploy them in other areas for sure.
And historically, when new jobs are created from the technology, they're usually better jobs.
Right.
They're higher skilled, higher paying
Yeah.
jobs.
The big question I have now, honestly, is a lot of the activity and routine things that are being replaced, are done largely by brand new employees coming out of school or coming out of high school or coming out of college, right? Well, if AI is doing all of that and these 22-year-olds with a brand new college degree can't find an entry level job, only jobs that are available are the more strategic ones. Well, what's that going to do to this whole generation where they have no place to start? You think about folks that are just freshmen this year in college. How do they decide what major to choose? What's going to happen in 4 years with the speed at which AI is disrupting everything? You really feel for those kids, right? So we're going to have to really spend some time as a country, really as a planet, trying to figure out how do we solve for that? What do we do with these 22-year-olds?
Well, it's a huge leadership issue. And one of the learnings I've picked up from doing this, there's a phrase that good leaders get results, great leaders develop future great leaders.
Right.
And to your point, how are we going to do that if
Right.
all the entry level work is being done by AI? So I think the answer to that question falls on the shoulders of our leaders,
hmm
that they
Yeah.
have to create avenues for talented people coming out of school that want to be in their industry,
Right.
to start learning.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing is AI unchecked, unregulated is very dangerous. You want smart, talented people with fresh ideas training these models. You don't want the models to start training themselves. And
Exactly.
I think the leaders have a big job to address here. To
Yeah.
make sure that talent is developed and the technology is managed to be accretive and value added and not a threat.
Yeah. And there's that phrase out there, I know it's getting overused now, but that phrase of human in the loop, which I think is a big part of this conversation. We need AI, and it's too great of a tool and too powerful of a tool to ignore, clearly. But we also need to figure out a way to use it as a tool for humans, not as a pure replacement for humans. It's two different things, I think. Pairing up a 22-year-old with a 52-year-old, for example, right? I mean, I'm 55. I understand AI, but I certainly don't use it other than just ChatGPT to do some things here and there. But 22-year-old, they know AI very, very well, right? And so pairing those people up where you have that human in the loop, right? The mentor that's been around for a while with the mentee who's kind of just coming in, but that mentee has a different perspective, back to the whole diversity of thought. But also that person's going to get that training, that support from the more experienced person. And then you can bring AI in, and then you've got two humans in the loop that are working with AI as a tool, as opposed to AI just strictly replacing a human.
And I think the data is showing that the most successful projects in AI, and most of them are still pilot projects, but the most successful ones are hybrid projects. They found that mix of a human machine
hmm
intervention that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
works.
Yeah.
While we're talking about AI, I'd actually like to explore a little bit how AI has impacted the recruiting process,
Mhm.
because you're talking about attracting talent, and I know there are a lot of people frustrated out there looking for jobs, and they're wondering, hey, am I really talking to a person, or is AI making all the decisions about whether I'm a good candidate or not? I'm wondering what your perspective is on how technology is helping or hurting the
Yeah.
recruiting process these days.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really comes down to a broad brush across all positions, right? If you're Amazon and you're adding 500,000 people for the holiday season to your distribution centers, that's a very different hiring process than a company saying, you know what, we have a succession plan in place, but we need to hire a new CEO, right? Two very different methodologies and approaches, clearly. But I think whether you're Amazon or anybody else out there, one of the mistakes that I see is that too many companies are relying too much on AI because of the efficiency factor. They think we'll just have AI do the video interview, look at the resume, do all that screening. We'll give it a list of criteria for a given position. It'll automatically screen people out. We'll have candidates apply through an automated video that they don't talk to an actual person. Yes, that's more efficient, certainly. It goes quickly, but you really degrade the whole candidate experience. And then the candidate says, I'm not sure I want to work for a company where I'm not talking to any human people. Is this how they operate? Is it what they expect of me? So it certainly creates more efficiency, but it's got to be tempered with the fact that, hey, you're still trying to hire a human being. You're not interviewing a robot. So don't use solely a robot, exclusively a robot to do that interviewing, right? I've been in recruiting now for almost 30 years. There has always been, over the last 25, I would say at least, always push back against companies that are relegating their resume screening to resume screening software. And I remember back in the Great Recession of '07, 9, 10, people were literally putting every keyword possible on their resume. This is a digital resume. All the keywords were there, but in white font. So with the naked eye, you saw a resume, you didn't realize that there's 27 other keywords that this person is not experienced in, but they put that on there because they knew the applicant tracking software would pick it up and they would get tagged as a great candidate to interview for the job. There's always been software that's been the lightning rod. There's always been ways to get around it. And I think AI is kind of similar. But I've always been a big champion of trying to figure out how to get your resume in front of the right person in a company rather than just applying to a job online. Because the double-edged sort of technology is that it allows for companies to more quickly post a job and get the word out there and get lots of applicants. Well, that's great. But the flip side is that technology has also allowed anybody under the sun to apply to any job. Just a click of a button. It's
True,
really
true.
simple. So a typical HR leader has to, sift through 3, 4, 500 resumes for one job when 99% of those resumes have no business applying for that position. So there's got to be a balance between the two. I also think that job descriptions are not written very well for the most part. Part of the challenge with resume scanning software is that it's based on a job description that is very poorly written. It's not really up to date. It doesn't include the right detail. It's very generic. And that makes it difficult to figure out who the right candidates are. I feel for candidates that are looking for a job, trying to figure out how to get through that applicant tracking system. And I always say that the best possible way is just to avoid it. Get your resume in there through a referral, a partner, someone that you know, go to a networking event and try to meet them that way. Obviously, it depends upon the kind of position and your level and industry, all those kind of things, certainly. But the best way to get around the applicant tracking system is to not have to engage with it at all.
It's really about developing the network and having some personal connection.
Right. And especially at the mid and senior levels where my firm and I, where we operate,
Yeah.
that's very much the case without question. But I think it's tough. It's tough for candidates to figure out, how do I get my resume into the company? I know I'm a good fit for this job. How can I get past that software to get to the right person? And then it comes down to leveraging tools like LinkedIn. Can I find a way to connect with this person? Do we have any kind of commonality between us in terms of our backgrounds? So finding other ways to make those soft connections is very powerful. You're much better off using your time going through LinkedIn and trying to find a way to make a connection than just applying to 100 jobs a week.
No, I think you're reaffirming a lot of things that I concluded, because I often wonder, do companies really know who they're hiring if they're going strictly through the resume process? Are they just screening based on, like you say, keywords or experiences? They really know who the person is and what's really going to make someone successful in the job. Is it really just the number of years of experience? Or is it ultimately their
Right.
character, their values, their interpersonal skills, their
Yeah.
drive? That's what's going to determine
Yeah.
if this person's going to be a good fit and successful.
Yeah. I mean, your skills will get you in the door. Your personality, your demeanor, your culture fit, as you described, will keep you there for sure.
That's great. Hey, just getting back to Ken Schmidt's leadership journey, I'm always curious, who are some of your role models? Who's influenced you? Who's kind of shaped your approach to business and leadership style?
Yeah, well, I mentioned my parents, obviously, they were both very instrumental. And my dad's a great example of someone who finished high school at 17, a brilliant individual, was going to be an architect, went through the first couple years of architecture school back in New York, and realized, you know what, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. So he left school, didn't get a college degree, and bought his first Carvel ice cream store. So very entrepreneurial,
Love
very
Carvel.
innovative. Yeah, exactly. And eventually got into Jack in the Box. So that's why I have a picture of him with his first store actually on my desk. That's one of my big motivators. As a business professional, as an entrepreneur, my dad is certainly a big influence. When I worked at Heidrick Struggles for 3.5 years, one of the partners that I worked with, I was very, very lucky. I was in the San Diego office, and it was a very small office physically, but we had a very big voice because the senior partner that ran the office was the former CEO of Heidrick Struggles and the former vice chair of Spencer Stewart, a guy named Ron Jervis. Ron was one of those leaders that we discussed earlier that was willing to take me under his wing and give me a lot more exposure than most people at my level were able to get within the Heidrick organization. And so he was the human in the loop, if you will, that really supported me, mentored me. And to this day, he's still someone I reach out to on a regular basis. So those are the two that come to mind. And as a lifelong learner, being in recruiting is a wonderful place to be. As I said at the outset, I get to learn from so many different leaders, how they lead, how you run a company, how you address crises. I read a lot as well. There's so much great content in Harvard Business Review and reading things online as well, that all those things, non-human factor in my life is just reading, constantly reading and trying to take it all in and help it kind of frame how I want to lead and what I want to impart on my clients when I'm helping them to hire leaders as well.
Well, Ken, you've given us some great insights and lessons today. I know we're getting close to running out of time here, but for people who are interested in your point of view and staying connected with you, how do they do that? And what are you up to in the future that they might be interested in?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is a great place to get a hold of me. I'm very active in LinkedIn, and we have quite a bit of content that we share, that we create polls and surveys and original content as well. So certainly follow me there at Ken Schmitt. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Practical Optimist. So if you want to get inside my head in terms of operating as a small business owner and all the trials and tribulations, we talked about the importance of vulnerability. I talk about perseverance and getting through kind of that due diligence you have to get through when you're running a business. That's a great place too. And now with the recent merger of my firm, the next step for us is growth and getting out there in front of more clients as well. And we'll see what 2026 holds.
Well, that's great, Ken. And best of luck with the new firm. I know you're going to continue that success and growth trajectory.
Thank
So,
you. I appreciate that.
congratulations with that.
Thank you.
And so, thank you again to our listeners and followers. We really appreciate you joining us and your continued support. Until the next episode of Leadership Art, this is your host, Art Robbins. And remember, it's your lead.